Glenn, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah,
Why do you look distinguished as your hair goes white and I look like Colonel Sanders?
It's because I dye mine white so that I look more credible.
Okay, good.
I think yours may be natural.
Yeah.
We were talking in the hall. I remember when both of us had more hair.
I know.
And it was much darker.
I know. And we were saying things at the time that no one else agreed with.
Yeah.
We were saying things that, I mean, that's still happening, but that nobody saw coming. Nobody saw this coming, Matt.
Yep. I find very little solace in saying, I told you so.
I know. It's really empty, and it for at least me, it causes more grief because I'm still doing it, and it didn't work then. Why would I expect doing the same thing is going to work this time?
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel useless.
Yeah. Well, I'm always an optimist. We're both optimists, whether we want to admit it or not, because we know history enough to know that the human spirit somehow rises up against authoritarianism.
It's like life. You can't extinguish it. It will find a way.
Yeah.
And the same thing with freedom. We may go through a very long period of darkness, but it will. I remember thinking back in about 2009, I was reading Marx and Jefferson at the same time. And Marx is just gobbledygook, and I think, just ridiculous, theory. Jefferson is just red meat. And I thought, how can that happen? Well, because Jefferson's not cool. Marx is cool.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's going to have to be banned. Marx is going to have to be embraced, and Jefferson's going to have to be banned. But when Jefferson becomes banned and people start reading it because it's underground, that's when freedom will come roaring back again.
I think I learned from you the elimination of the four olds during the Cultural Revolution in China, and the way, in order for Chinese communism to thrive, they had to erase their history.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to erase their institutions, starting with the family.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to erase religion, and they had to start with a blank slate. And I see that in all of this political correctness today, and it didn't come from nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be part and parcel to the takeover. I don't know if takeover is the right word. It's a cultural thing. I don't think it's a centrally planned thing. I think it's a cultural corruption that is.
I think there's two opposing, not two parties that think they're in league with each other, but they're not. One will end up killing the other. Mm-hmm. There are those people who believe in freedom, and they're kind of, let's put them off to the side. Then there's these Marxists who actually believe in anarchy and Marxists and all of that stuff. The other group that they're fighting with currently is the politician and the corporation. And I've never, I used to mock people who are like, yeah, the United Corporations of America. And I'd be like, come on, man, really? No, I was wrong. I was deeply, deeply wrong. And these corporations are, not only more powerful than any government on earth, they're also colluding with those politicians.
Yeah.
They need each other. And boy, it won't be hard to erase our history. I mean, we don't have libraries. A library could disappear today in your town. You wouldn't know about it because nobody goes.
Yeah.
They just disappear off of your electronic shelf. They're gone forever.
I've come up with a phrase for this. I call it political capture, and I'm an economics dork, and economists have this phrase called regulatory capture, where big corporations will use their pull in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
to create barriers to entry for everybody else. More regulations, more speech codes, more taxes, all of that. Political capture is the flip side of that. The Democratic Party has just taken control of almost everything in Washington, D.C., and it is pretty clear to me that those big corporations are now sort of looking for favor. Not favors, but pandering to those powerful people.
I think you and I agree on the direction. We may have difference in terms. I believe in the Great Reset.
Mm-hmm.
What do you call it? You don't call it the Great Reset?
I call it COVID socialism.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
I think it's basically the same thing, except there is, I wrestled a long time. Why would these corporations just flush America down the toilet? Why would you do that to a huge market like America? And the argument was like, well, China. Well, yeah, China, but then the rest of the Western world you're just going to say no to? It doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, you could make that case, but to me it didn't make sense. Until you understand that if you're on the inside, you're going to get China, you're going to get the West, and you're going to eventually get America.
Yeah.
Because we'll plow all the roads for you. All you have to do is play ball. When everybody you're an economist, when Bank of America says, as they did a few days ago, that we're in, what is it, transitional? No, but temporary hyperinflation at best. That's their quote. At the very best, temporary hyperinflation is coming. Well, I mean, all hyperinflation is temporary, I would speculate. But when you know that, and you know tough times are coming, how do I protect myself? How do I protect my company? All I have to do is just throw my bag in with these guys who I kind of agree a lot with the same things, and all that other stuff is crap. But it'll be the corporations that win anyway, and the government.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not? It would make sense.
Well, they know that when the pecking order comes down and the government decides who to save and who not to save, they're going to save those who are compliant first, those with a seat at the table, right?
Oh, yeah.
And this was this was the birth of the Tea Party movement, the Wall Street bailout.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that the government, the insiders, just arbitrarily decided that bank dies and this bank gets a big bailout. And we were screaming from the rooftops back then.
Yeah.
And the lesson for corporate America, and it definitely didn't start with the Wall Street bailout, but the lesson was fall in line.
See, here's what's really frightening. If you look at, I mean, because I've been thinking, who's going to bail out the Fed? How does that work? I don't know if you know the answer. Do you know the answer to this?
I would say the printing press.
Labor unions. I thought it was a printing press too. In 2022, the government is now, we back all pensions. The U.S. government backs all pensions, so we'll just print if your pension goes down. But the labor unions now must, required by law beginning in 2022, by 33% of all of their investments must be U.S. Treasuries. And this is coming through the Emergency COVID Act that also coincidentally says the Federal Reserve, for the first time, can sell them on the open market. They've never been able to do that. So all of their debt it's about $9 trillion that they're holding. Guess what the amount is of 30% of all the pensions? About $9 trillion.
Yeah.
So in the end, it's all the big players, all are fine. All the heads of the unions are fine. But everyone that is working, everybody who's played it right, we're all going to get screwed.
Yeah. And it is an extension of the printing press because it's basically an artificial expansion of the government's ability to borrow money it doesn't have.
Right now, it's just a shell game. It is the biggest Ponzi scheme. We thought Social Security was a Ponzi scheme. This is just moving money one place to another until it all comes apart.
Let's call it the Argentinian model, because their last gasp was raiding the pension system as a form of bailing out the government.
Wow.
So, and we all know how that one turned out.
Yeah.
Well, we still don't know exactly how bad that gets. Which reminds me, my phrase, COVID socialism, is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it comes from wartime communism, which is what Lenin imposed on the Russian people during the Russian Revolution. And what did they do during war communism? They nationalized everything, and they started redistributing wealth. And I'm thinking about it in the context, and this probably makes me sound like a nut job, but think about the...
You're with me.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't sound nutty. Nothing will sound nutty.
But just think about vaccines. For the first time in my lifetime, governments globally nationalized the production and acquisition and distribution of something that is essential to people's health.
Right.
Forget where you are in vaccines for a second. And to me, that is a model. Like, how do we go back from that when it comes to other healthcare stuff?
Well, that's all of Biden's speech was about that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he laid the groundwork for, look, I of course believe in this democracy, but, you know, can we really move fast enough with the world that we're living in? I don't know. Some people say no. I'm willing to see. But it was, I mean, I've never seen a president address the Congress instead of the American people on a State of the Union address, unless he's scolding them. This one was saying, you did it. You saved the nation. Because of how they gobbled up everything and grabbed the reins during COVID. And he's using that as an example of we really have to do that with everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, there's 1,000 examples, some of which are draconian and some which nobody's noticed, but his radical use of the Defense Production Act. Going back to wartime socialism. And Trump did this too. So
he didn't put the wartime, or he didn't put the
Defense
Production Act. Because I know they really wanted him to.
Yeah.
But I don't think he did it. Did he?
I thought he did.
I don't think he did, but I could be wrong.
People watching can Google this. But either way, the idea that you would use something that's clearly designed for wartime, for the war against COVID, that's the crisis that the radical left has wanted.
It's the war against racism. It's the war on equity. It's the war on COVID. It's everything is a war now. Yeah. And you know, I was glad to see DeSantis, and here I am in Texas, and I don't know if Governor Abbott has done this yet. He's been a little disappointing. But I was glad to see that DeSantis, who I'm not in love with, but I'll take it, he actually ended the state of emergency.
Yeah.
How many of these states are going to say, hey, we're open up, but not end the state of emergency?
Yeah.
That's extraordinarily dangerous.
And it's like when they point to the fact that we're not recovering, and I've seen this narrative that, you know, the question is, were the lockdowns what destroyed the economy, or was it people's fear and their unwillingness to go to restaurants or whatever it is? And I'm clearly in the lockdown camp. And we've now succeeded in scaring people, so there will certainly be people that won't want to go back out. But more importantly, we've somehow incentivized potential employees not to want to go back to work because they can make more money not working. And almost to the point where they view customers as the enemy.
Have you been up to New York lately?
I won't go back.
Okay. I had to go up for a funeral. I was in Connecticut, so right next to it. It's the same mentality over there. I walked into a store, and it was me, my son, and my son-in-law. We walked in because we had to go to the funeral, so we had to go buy white shirts. So we go into this store, and this guy was, I mean, it was like, I thought, is there somebody with a gun behind us that has just walked in? He was full-fledged freaking out.
Yeah.
He had a mask on. We all had a mask on. And he said, can I help you? We're like, yeah, we're looking for some shirts and some ties. Okay, just stay there. It was so surreal. I went to a flower shop to get some flowers for the funeral, and it was like a 3,000 square foot flower shop. It was a big flower shop, okay? Only one customer at a time. They came out, because I was with 3 people, they came out of the flower shop, wouldn't let us go into the flower shop, came out of the flower shop. We were at least, 8 feet apart from each other right here? We were at least this far apart. I didn't have my mask on because I was outside. The wind was blowing in my face, not her face. So all my germs would have blown back into my face. She was so uncomfortable. And I said, I'm sorry, do you want me to wear a mask? She said, no, I'll just back away. We were 12 feet apart from each other. It was like we were on MSNBC or NBC, or 60 Minutes interview.
Yeah. It's
become a psychological problem.
Yeah, and it feeds into the dehumanization that you see in authoritarian cultures. We start not to trust each other.
Yep.
Even wearing a mask.
We start to report on one another.
Yeah, like mass confrontations, but if you can't see somebody's face, they're a little less human than they would be otherwise. And the way we don't trust each other, and Stu said this earlier, I was on his show, and he's like, it's like people have become the virus. And it's really creepy. And I worry what we might do to each other as we continue down this path.
I have to tell you, I just can't, I can no longer assign, like I used to with the Tea Party and everything else, I can't assign any good motives for a vast majority of smart people in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
I can't, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know what these things lead to. It's just, this is, when I was a kid, I remember reading the Bible, with my parents, and you'd read it and you'd be like, wait, didn't this just happen 4 pages ago? How did they not recognize exactly the same scenario? You know what I mean? We're those people.
Yeah.
We're those people. And somebody's going to read about us in history and say, wait, that country that stopped communism and stopped fascism, they didn't see it when it was coming to their shores? They missed that somehow? Yeah.
The war metaphor is apt. There's this classic book in libertarian economics called Crisis in Leviathan by a guy named Robert Higgs. And he documents in a very clear way the ratchet effect. And it's usually war, but it could be whatever crisis the government is confronting. And maybe it's real, maybe it's a Stalinist kind of created crisis. And the net effect is that the power and expansion of government grows, and you don't get to come back.
No.
And
they're never going to give that power back.
No, they never give it back. And I would include the war on terror. I'm fascinated that when I'm in the airport today, I don't hear about potential terrorist threats anymore. Remember the announcements they used to tell you, look out, there might be a bad person next to you, and if they leave their luggage, make sure to report it. It's all stand 6 feet apart, and if you're not wearing your mask, you might get arrested, and all of that. So they've replaced it. They've replaced one war with another war. And of course
and they've replaced one group of terrorists with another group of terrorists.
Yeah. But this time it's
us.
It's you for not wearing a mask in New York
Right.
City. And of course the whatever the intended consequences were for enhanced surveillance and all of these new powers we gave to the state to stop terrorism, they're turning it on us.
I know.
And
it's funny because that was the risk. I was for the Patriot Act for about 2 months. And then I started going, that is an awful lot of, and it was too late. But I've regretted my support.
Yeah.
Since about 2 months after it was passed, really regretted it. And if you look at it now, they have backdoors everywhere. When the Postal Service is running surveillance on the American system. I said to my wife Sunday, we were driving someplace, and she saw a postal truck pull out. And she said, why is the post office? They're not delivering mail on Sunday, are they? And I said, they're probably just spying on the neighborhood. And I said it as a joke, and then I realized, oh my gosh, that's insane. That's insane to think that the post office is monitoring people. That it has gone completely off the rails.
Yeah, and we don't hear much about it anymore, but this whole domestic terrorist narrative coming out of the Biden administration.
Very dangerous.
It's weaponizing, but the gateway was the Patriot Act, but year after year, they've expanded that power. The courts have refused to rein in that power. And
I can't believe what happened with the FISA courts and the FBI.
yeah,
And the fact that the people that did it to the president of the United States were just promoted, and the FISA courts now have a warrantless FISA warrant, I guess. You don't need the evidence. You could just go to them and go, yeah, we need this one. And they're like, okay, for a little while.
yeah.
What is that?
Drip, drip, drip. And that, of course, is the story about power. It only accrues in one direction when you don't have people that are willing to rein it in. And I feel like the bad guys now have the ultimate weapon, which is our fear. People are scared to death. The lady that was supposed to sell you flowers is just scared to death about this virus. And the vaccine doesn't cure her fear. And the data certainly doesn't cure her fear. The fact that Texas opened up and everybody predicted that it would be the end of the world.
Florida, same thing.
Yeah.
It's no facts seem to matter. No facts seem to matter anymore. And when you look at it's a mental disorder at this point. I really believe it is some sort of a mental disorder. Because, look, I would be all with you if it was as deadly as we thought it was going to be at first.
Yeah.
And it affected the mass population. And it was going up, not going down when you opened it up. If California and New York were doing marvelous and Texas and Florida were on fire, you might go, maybe there's something to it. No facts or data match the narrative. And it is, I really believe, a mental disorder.
Yeah. And I also think there's a very specific reason why Joe Biden, who is vaccinated, wears a mask when he's out on the White House lawn, walking to his helicopter, wherever he's going.
Still wears it. Yep.
It's a religion, but it's a signal that we should be afraid. And I think they could have easily declared, the Biden administration could have come in and said, I think we got this thing beat. I think we're on the downslide side. I think everything's going to be okay. But they're doing the opposite.
So you want to know, and I agree with you, and let me give you some evidence. They're saying that that people are afraid of it and they don't want to take it, and now the conservatives don't want to take it, blah, 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 and people have suddenly stopped taking it. Well, first of all, what you did with Johnson & Johnson was insane. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That story is, hey, there's a 1 in a was it 1 million or 6 million chance that this could happen to you. So, we're looking into it, but relax. They didn't do that. Then when he held his speech last week, it was surreal. It was a dystopian movie and I watched them because I had the raw feed from the Capitol. So as a network, we were getting the raw feed. Matt, they were all standing next to each other, hugging each other, shaking hands, laughing.
Wow.
As soon as it got to be about 5 minutes before, they all went to their areas, they all put the masks on, and they sat there. And I thought, wait, you're having a hard time getting people to take the vaccine. Here's how you do it. You have all of those people who have all been vaccinated. That room has been cleaned and sterilized. You say, look, it's going to be a clean room, and everyone who has been vaccinated, come, because you can't get it, and you can't give it to somebody who's already been vaccinated. And the president take off his mask, and everybody is maskless, and he looks into the camera and says, America, it's time we go back to normal.
Yeah.
That would have been the message. Instead, the numbers are going one way, and they're making it scary every single day.
Which gets us to the subject that I know you've talked a lot about, is the Great Reset, what I'm calling COVID socialism. And it is pretty clear to me that this administration is not going to let a good crisis go to waste.
Oh, no.
They're feeding the crisis. They're almost at this point creating the crisis so that they can do things that were just unimaginable just 3 or 4 years ago. Multi-trillion-dollar pieces of legislation that nobody's read. Trillions of dollars.
Trillions. In the last 12 months, so this includes Trump and the Fed, $19 $16.4 trillion.
Yeah.
Our entire debt from George Washington to today is 28. We just spent $19 trillion. Do you know just the accounting on that? Just to make sure that the money is accounted for? That's unthinkable.
Yeah.
Try to spend $19 trillion. Try it.
It's impossible. And this number surely doesn't include the Fed, but spending as a debt as a percentage of GDP now surpasses where Greece was during their collapse. And for all of our fighting against debt and trying to balance budgets, I never could have conceived of being in this situation.
I actually thought there would come a time where we would have a serious conversation. I mean, I thought less and less so in the last few years. But I thought there'd come a time where everybody would go, okay, wait, okay? Instead, they did the exact opposite. They're like, you know what? We're all dead. Let's eat, drink, and be merry today. $19 trillion.
Yeah. And they're just getting started.
They are.
So what is going on from your perspective?
So from my perspective, what makes sense to me is if you listen to the Davos crowd and you listen to people like John Kerry and the global warming people. The global warming people are being used. The Marxists are being used. Those are the troubles. You know what I mean? They're not stopping the Marxists in the streets. They're not doing that. They're ginning up the people that believe in a constitution and limited government as they're the bad guys. Okay? And they're ginning everybody up to say it's these liberty people that are the bad guys. And everybody seems to be on board with that. So they're printing money 6 or 8 months before the COVID virus hit. I was asking questions on the Fed because they just opened up what used to be called the discount window, and they were printing billions of dollars and giving it to the banks for some unknown reason, and nobody would talk about it. And we did the figures on it, and we said, by springtime, this is going to explode. Something's wrong. Then COVID hit. And now nobody even asks about it, and they're printing even more and giving it to the banks.
Yeah.
So everybody is enriching themselves, gouging themselves on this free money up at the upper end. The corporations, they've all said for a long time, we've heard people say this, and I remember being really one of the only ones in several rooms where I went, no, I don't think China would be the good model for the future. That's bad. No, we're just talking about business. Yeah, even in business, I think that would be bad because it's not a free market. You have to play the game.
Yeah.
And the government picks and chooses. We have gotten some of our biggest corporations, Google, Nike, everybody, in bed with China and so dead inside to real atrocities, they don't really care.
Yeah.
And they're in it for the money. Look, we got to do what we got to do. The government wants to do the same thing. I mean, wouldn't it be so much easier for all of them if they could just get rid of the pesky Constitution and they could just spy on all of us because we're too dumb to rule ourselves? And why not? We have all the tools. We're doing it anyway. Let's just make it official. I mean, that's where we're headed. We are headed towards a Chinese system, a global economy. And if you don't believe me, that's great. I hope I'm wrong. But every time there's a big crisis, and you're like, well, it's because the banks are too big. What do? They make them bigger.
Yeah.
Now everything is about to fail. So what do? You scoop it all up and make it global. It's bad.
Yeah. Like I'm hearing in the context of COVID, I'm hearing respectable people say again and again and again, China got it right.
I know.
And we got it wrong.
I remember a year ago being on the air and saying, Can you imagine this happening in America, where they close down a city and tell everyone they have to say? Can you imagine that? That could never happen here. Oh my gosh.
And in a couple weeks,
Yeah.
it happened. And to the point about sort of cronyism, and by the way, like business controlled by government, or that collusion, there's a technical term for that, right? It's called fascism. It's not socialism.
Thank you.
It's fascism. And, you know, we don't like to use that word because it's almost become meaningless, but from an economic point of view,
That's exactly what it was.
it is.
There, you know, Joe Biden, did you see what he said before his speech to the select reporters? You didn't see this? So before his speech, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, look, guys, I mean, I don't think you guys will agree with me, but I think we're in a time of history where historians will look back and look, the big question is whether a republic, whether a democracy can still compete in a world that is moving this fast against autocracies. And he said, that's the big question of our age. And he planted that in his speech several times.
Yeah.
This is the same question that Wilson was asking the American people back at the turn of the last century. You know, that was Hitler, that was Mussolini. We'll win because we can make bullets, we can make tanks, we can tell the industry exactly what to do. That's what the left is saying they want to do now. It's the same argument. And if I remember right, it was the American worker that came in. We had broomsticks, we had no planes, we had nothing. Yes, FDR did a lot of the fascistic stuff, but I contend we could have done it without him because we wanted to.
Yeah.
You just have to convince people you want to do this.
Yeah. The question today, and I'm thinking of of vaccination passports, and there was this ridiculous debate amongst libertarians because some libertarians were saying, well, we can do vaccination passports as long as it's private. And I'm like, there's very little difference between let's say Google. I don't know who's going to manage vaccination passports, but let's say some big corporation builds a system, and they're all vying for this, right? They all want to build this social credit system for us.
IBM and the Holocaust,
yeah.
I'd like to point out.
But the reality is, it is government controlled. It is government sanctioned. And I did some digging on the actual Chinese social credit system, and it turns out that it's not a government system. It is very much a web of nominally private corporations in the banking sector, in every aspect of life in the Chinese social credit system leads to your ranking. It's not government owned. It's not socialism.
No.
It's government controlled. It's fascism.
It's the banks. Who was it? Was it Citi or Bank of America this week that said, they're going to retool and they're going to abide by the Paris Accords? Well, the Paris Accords, you talk to anybody on global warming that actually knows what they're talking about, they'll be like, the Paris Accords do nothing on global warming. The Paris Accords were all about the financial system. And the financial system, once they establish the ESGs and they start living by the Paris Accords, now they can say, you're harmful for social justice, you're harmful for the environment, you're harmful for equity or the environment, and I can't do business with you. So now you're cut out. And it goes as far, the EU just passed the language, they haven't passed the bill yet, but they just passed the language to where an ESG score, environmental, social justice, and governmental, which means, do you have the right people on your board? That score, if you have a score, you can't do business with people who don't have a score or who have a low score, up or down in the chain.
Yeah.
You can't sell your product to somebody with a low score. You can't buy pieces for your product from a company with a low score. If that's not total control, I don't know what is.
Yeah. And the question is, what's the counter-revolution to all of that centralization? And I've noticed a trend which was mystifying me at first. I think it was John Brennan, is that his name, on MSNBC, when he was talking about domestic terrorists. He sort of casually said at the end of his laundry list, and libertarians.
Yes. They did it again, I think, today. I heard.
Yeah,
I was like, libertarians?
Who's on, I can't believe I'm blanking on this guy's name, but the guy that does Meet the Press.
Oh, yeah, Chuck Todd.
Yeah, so Chuck Todd did the same name drop this past Sunday. He's like, and the libertarians, there's a pipeline between libertarianism and domestic terrorism. Did I say libertarian terrorism? Libertarian philosophy and domestic terrorism. I'm like, why are they picking on us? We don't have any power.
You don't, yeah, I mean.
We don't control anything. And I think it's because there's this.
The liberty streak.
There's this liberty streak in people.
It is.
And there's also a liberty streak in the same technologies that are centralizing everything. Why do you think they so hate crypto? Why do you think they hate blockchain?
Correct.
Why do you think they hate anybody speaking about liberty? It's because no matter what you do, human innovation and fighting against the machine and thinking for yourself, these are things that are hard to snuff out.
Yes, they are. And it's and it is libertarian is the non-political. It's just a philosophy of, hey man, I'll leave you alone, you leave me alone. And people, when they actually talk about libertarianism, ideas, the philosophy of libertarian, everybody embraces that. Yeah. Almost everybody embraces that. It's just when you start to throw it into politics that it gets all messy, because people in America can't handle more than two parties, I think.
Yeah.
And you have to snuff that out, because that's the philosophy that leads you back to Thomas Jefferson.
Yep. But it also is a philosophy that gives me optimism. And then maybe I'm a little bit crazy on this, but I was just talking to our friend Lee Schooland, who escaped Mao's China and the Cultural Revolution, and we were talking about Tiananmen Square. What happened in China in the early 1980s when there was a little bit of technology and there was a little bit of freedom, because the Chinese government understood that they would never compete with the United States unless they let a little modicum of that C word, capitalism, in there. And what happened was young people in particular realized that freedom, wow, that's what I've been looking for my entire life, and I didn't even know it existed, and I didn't know you could shop at grocery stores, and I didn't know that you could listen to music, and I didn't know that you could actually choose who you dated. All of these things that free people just assume that's the only way to live. And of course that led to a intolerable revolution that was crushed by the most brutal means imaginable. But you can't snuff out people's sense for freedom.
Oh, you can. You can. And I'm afraid there's a good shot of it happening. You know, they're just setting up for. We know who the enemy is. I mean, they're bad movie writers. This movie that we're in right now is so obvious, you know, of, oh my gosh, Black Bart, who voted for Donald Trump, he's finally here. Oh, Nell, I'll cut you from the railroad tracks. It's so almost vaudevillian, melodramatic schmaltz that you're like, who's buying into this? You can see all it's going to take is look at the way they're describing what happened at the Capitol. That was a bloody insurrection. That's how I heard it described today on MSNBC. A bloody insurrection. No, it wasn't. It was a bunch of, maybe some were organized, but generally disorganized people that were really upset, some bad guys that did break the law. They did all the things you shouldn't do. It was horrible. And then they got shot. I mean, that's not an insurrection. If that's an insurrection, wow. What a bad insurrection that is. That was just a really sad event. Not the biggest as Biden said in his speech, the biggest attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
Yeah.
Come on. That's a setup. That's
Yeah.
a setup. What's coming? You know, they were talking about, what was it? Gun control was, I can't remember. He was asked something in a press conference, and it was just from a regular person. And he said, yeah, not yet. It's all about timing. All timing. Let's do this first. And I thought, this guy is not the strategist. He's not getting up and going, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do today. It's all a matter of timing? What does that mean? You want to take guns away from people? It's a matter of timing. So what are you waiting for? And I just fear you have one big shot. You have a September 11th, and you pin it on one group. You turn the entire nation inside out.
Yeah. Going back to war communism, Lenin, the entire Leninist strategy was if you didn't have an enemy, you had to create one. So that you could keep people mobilized against that imaginary enemy so that they wouldn't notice what was happening to you. And that two-pillared narrative coming from the left, one is COVID, we're never going to be safe again, and two is that domestic terrorism. And you and I were outspoken, denounced the behavior at the Capitol. We actually ended up doing your podcast the day after the attack on the Capitol. And I think the reason that we've always preached nonviolence is both from a moral perspective and a tactical perspective. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Morally, it's reprehensible. Tactically, it's just the dumbest thing. I've been saying this forever. You and I have both been going, that's what they want.
Yeah.
They want you to strike out. Look at what they're doing. It's like they're winding people up so hard. They're just like, when will you snap? Remember Nancy, I think it was Nancy Pelosi saying, I can't believe that there's not more riots in the streets or something like that. Yeah. We're incredibly tolerant. But somebody at some point snaps like they did on January 6th. Reprehensible and the worst thing that could have happened for the liberty movement.
Helped the left so much because now, like, you shifted all the narrative away from violence of Antifa, which had been happening for a year, and the press didn't want to talk about that. And now they have, the worst. What did Biden say? The worst.
The worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
Yeah. So, when I originally set out to have this conversation with you, you had just done a podcast with Megyn Kelly, and she was all fired up. And she, I don't actually remember the full context now, but her general point was, we have to fight this with everything we have. And you were both talking about, like, what is the counter-revolution? And I'm sure people ask you, they ask me all the time, how do we do another Tea Party? How do we get the band back together?
I don't think you do.
And I don't think you do for a million reasons.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, that was a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, the tools are different.
Mm-hmm.
The technology is different. And third of all, I don't know if the Republican Party is all that credible anymore.
Oh, no, there's nothing to rally around. And I don't see anyone that could rally the troops. Donald Trump is probably the best rallying point, but he's not a principled constitutional guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
He turned out to be a guy that I ended up liking because I can't believe the guy's stamina. Who is under that kind of attack all the time and just doesn't snap. Also, I liked some of the things he did. I really disliked other things that he did. But he's the only one that I've seen galvanize anybody because the right is so split now, and we've made it you're with me 100% or you're not with me at all, and we can't do that. I'm not with Donald Trump 100%. I'm not against him 100%. I'm with him when he's right. I'm against him when he's wrong. Call them as you see them. And, everybody's just demanding purity. And you can't put something together when it has to be 100% pure. You just can't. The idea, the principles, if we could get a movement that said, these are the principles. First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, the amendments. Just give me 9 out of the top 10 amendments. If you can do that, let's fight together. That's a big number of people. But that is not where anybody's headed.
Yeah.
Nobody's headed there.
Well, it probably makes me sound a little mamby-pamby, but I don't think there is a political solution to this problem.
I agree.
Who wins and who loses and who controls the White House absolutely matters. But until we get upstream of politics into culture and reignite those values, that's the way we have to do this. But we've been talking about this for years too.
Well, let's not forget, both of us as individuals and a lot of others really have made an impact in culture. As far as we have gone, we're playing from 0 to 60 miles an hour. And yes, we need to be going 400 miles an hour. And at the same time, we've had everything going against us. To build a network, remember when I built the Blaze, only HBO was online.
Right.
Only HBO. I think Netflix had just gotten online. And it was insane. It was insane. We had to build everything from scratch. Now it seems really easy, but now we were getting really good. I'm not saying the Blaze, I'm saying the right was getting really good at making videos and getting them into the culture and getting them out there, and they are all being suppressed.
Right.
Get your own internet. Okay. Okay, like we're going to do that. We are up against a rock and a hard place.
It's kind of whack-a-mole, and this again, I could be optimistic about this because, when Blaze TV went to market, you were first to market, and by the way, it sucks being first to market.
Does
because you get your butt beat quite a bit.
Yeah, but we made it.
Yeah, you made it, and it reminds me of the Tea Party was the first wave of sort of democratized protest movements, and it's because of technology. It was a perfect storm of all those things, and you remember how they used to prevent us from marching on the public square.
Mm-hmm.
Whack, we're going to stop that.
Yeah.
And then they sicked the IRS on the Tea Party, and then we shifted to social media, and we started killing it, telling that story. Whack. Now they're trying to suppress that. Your stuff gets suppressed, my stuff gets suppressed. But it tells me that innovation has to be the answer.
Look, think of the time and the energy and the money they have spent to whack each of us. It's incredible. That should tell you everything you need to know on who has the winning answer.
Yeah.
Because we got no money. We don't have any engines behind us. We got nothing. We just have ideas, and they are terrified by those ideas. And I think really, if I had a magic wand, I would teach 20% of America, just 20%, 18%, to truly understand the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. If you get 20% of America just saying, I don't think so, dude, that's right, you could change the world. But people don't know them. Even the people that were in the Tea Party, they were like, yeah, I'm for the Constitution. Really? Really? Where are you? Mm-hmm. Where are you? And that's going to be the only thing I think that saves us is if decent people who don't agree with each other see injustice and say, I'm sorry, I can't go along with this. I got to stand up. And they have courage to stand in their local community. It's all local. Look what happened in Southlake. Here in Southlake, Texas, it's a school district where blacks and whites perform equally in the tests. Do you know of another school that does that? School district in America where black, whites, everybody performs generally equally on all of their final exams? I don't. It's not a town that had racism as a problem or anything else, but man, they attacked it with critical race theory. Then 2 school board members went to jail because they were colluding to just pass these things without any open hearings. Okay, just trying to put it in. The people, they probably, you talk to most people, they'd be like, yeah, I want people to be treated fairly and equity, and they'll use all those words that they don't really know what it means. And they probably would have not done anything. But once they found out that this was being jammed down their throat, they didn't like it. The former school board lost 70-30 to all the people that were standing up against them. 70-30, biggest turnout in that town ever, and it's a town that just voted for Joe Biden.
Yeah, that I did not know that story, but
it's remarkable.
It's a beautiful story, and I like it because it gives me that optimism, and I'm hoping that education generally might be that sort of flashpoint where parents realize that the government system is not for their kids.
I have to tell you, there's two stories. One, I think we're getting close to a Reagan moment, but it can't be done by national leaders.
Yeah.
Remember when Reagan was in office and the airport controllers, the air traffic controllers went on strike, and he's like, "You're not back to work by Monday. I'm firing all of you. We'll just find new people." And he did. And that kind of changed things a little bit. I can't wait for the school districts that the parents finally just rise up and say, I want all these teachers out. I want all these teachers out.
Yeah.
We want to find new teachers. This teacher union, if you don't belong to the teachers union, come apply. But all of this crap is out. And I think that could happen. I think we're getting close to some things like that because they're too close to home with too much dangerous stuff.
Yeah. Let's leave it there because that's optimistic. we could go down another dark rabbit hole.
No. Us? Never.
Yeah, maybe, but it's good catching up. It's
good talking to you.
Good hanging out in person.
Yeah. I miss you.
That was amazing. Where can I get more content just like that? It's a great question. You're clearly a discerning consumer of the best content. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and click the bell. And if you're consuming podcasts, go to Apple, Stitcher, anywhere you get them. I'm in. Kibbe on Liberty, honest conversations with interesting people.